I don't know if you heard that, but that was your own computer. That was my PC. I was about to lose my mind. You're welcome. Oh, that reminds me. I always forget because it's just us here. I always forget to like turn stuff on because it's like, hey, you didn't announce it anywhere. It's like, yeah, I didn't announce it anywhere because I have to go click buttons and I forget to click the button. See, I clicked one of the buttons. Okay. So now you're gonna get pung. Uh I have to click another button now. I'm honestly talking pretty loud today, so I'm gonna say that's on your end because I know when I talk quietly, and today is not that day, unless maybe my mic's not oriented the right way. Hi! I hope it goes well too. I'm gonna go have dance battles. I am totally not late again, like usual. That doesn't happen to me, right? You know what? I'm gonna say that's just a headphone issue. I can't take responsibility if it's not me causing it, I think. I'm making up music as I go. Okay, I've set everything up. Oh no, I didn't. That's a lie. I lied. Hold on. Okay, okay, everything's set up. That's a lie. I lied. Hi. Welcome back to I don't have intro music, so you got to sit in silence for the last 5 minutes. It was this 5 minutes. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Alright. Because I would stare silence is deafening. We gotta do some sort of music. I thought about it. I thought about it, and I'm gonna get to it, but that's like on the backlogs because like it doesn't affect me. If it affected me, hi, thank you for following. If it affected me, then I would do something about it. But don't further notice, not my issue. Also, I forget, so I just have to set up a reminder mostly. I hope your day's going well. Today we're gonna have some dance battles. Uh, oh yeah, peep the new fit. I didn't really want to dress up today, so we're going casual. I don't forget everything. I could have had that in the background if it wouldn't have closed. Today, like I said, we're playing Ooblets, but I forgot to change the screen again, didn't I? Hold on. That's just a picture of me. We're just gonna put that to the side. We're gonna go here. I'm gonna be too close. I'm gonna be close. Don't look at me too much. I'm a little too close right now. Actually, I could get closer actually, but I'm not going to, so. Oh, you can see all my weird files because I forgot to turn that off as well. Oh, you want me to get closer, huh? You want me to get closer? Is this close enough for you? Huh? Am I close enough for you? I am now the entire screen, and I am now the whole game, and you can't do anything about it. Oh, also, look at him. Alright, let's continue before we derail. Honestly, Hammond could probably take over the whole stream and no one would even notice that I'm gone. He could just do the whole thing. And none of you would know. Oh, that's too small. Probably. Listen, don't question it. Hold on, I have to look through the side. Okay, we press that, then we press this button, then we go back to where we were, then we press this button, then we get a little bit closer, and that's when we get a little bit closer. We get a little bit more, and then you go up here, and you go a little bit more. Ta-da! And then we're back to normal size. Probably. Maybe if I made myself look a little bit more this way. Whap. Alright, hi, welcome to my streams Probably Scuffed, with your host, someone who has a bad mic that cuts out at everything. Just for you. I wish I could have this game... I'm way too large. I wish I could have this game be borderless so that I could not have to be constantly doing this, because it's not very nice, honestly, in my opinion. But we don't have that in life. We have this. Look at this. That's why is my hands are mirrored. So my right hand is my right hand. Wait, hold on. I always mirror this. You're about to see some wonky settings. Mirror motion. That's why. Oh, there's my hands. Don't ask about that. Alright, back to the actual game. We have Ooblets. I can't reach very far in today. But we're gonna play that game up there. And that's not who we're picking today. We're picking someone actually cute. I have a game that I was playing, but I did not play it for a few months. I actually got into the date of playing this game. It's just so cute, so I couldn't say no to it. Don't question everything. Okay, listen, every single time, I have to, like, click it 3 to 4 times. I'm working on it. I have to click it 3 to 4 times, and then once I do click it 3 or 4 times, then the settings reset, but until then, I don't know. It always says I'm streaming something, and then I'm not, so. I will turn it down once I get there. Until then, I am yelling. Isolated Ara Island, where the people are stuffy and there aren't even any Ooblets. settings at? I'm sorry. Actually, until further notice, I'll turn myself up more. It wasn't at 100%. No, I'm just gonna take a drink. I'm busy enjoying my life. Interesting, you're gonna have to deal with it. There we go, is that better? I'm gonna turn it down more once I get to the menus, but until further notice, you're still getting, I won't be, don't bill me the insurance. I can't pay because I'm poor, but it's the point. Are you from the Ooblet High Council? Is this a surprise inspection? Did I fail? No, I'm Mizu from Arrow Island. Oh, then how do? Welcome to Badge Town. My name is Tinsel. Oh, and I'm the mayor. What can I help you with? I'm looking to start a new life somewhere. Possibly here? Splenda! Were you looking to buy a house? Maybe invest in the local economy? Well, I have no money or skills or personal possessions, so a true entrepreneur then. Sounds like me. I can work with this though, yeah. I've been needing a helper for my ever-expanding mayoral task list. Good luck, Avon. Go punch that bread nice and hard. And then it's an old abandoned farmhouse. You can have it if you help me with all the junk I gotta do over here. Even free houses don't just get offered every day. I'm in. What can I help with first? Fantastic. First off, wait, where are your Ooblets? I don't have any. They don't have Ooblets where I'm from. We're about to meet some of the cutest, darndest things. I've been in Oogum. It's gonna be tough to do that much without Ooblets here. Well, your local Ooblet club will probably be able to give you one. What Ooblet club are you in? We don't have Ooblet clubs where I'm from either. We'll start up, no bother. You can join one here. Let me fetch our local club leader and you can introduce yourself to some townsfolk in the meantime. This is getting very mouthy. Very, very mouthy. Settings. And I'll turn the settings down. Probably 60 and 6. There we go. Oof, that was a lot to say. Alright, we're here to collect stuff. I didn't get very far in the bait, I'm not gonna lie. I can't pick these up. Okay. And the reason I didn't get very far is the game was very new when I first played it, but I've seen that there's been quite a few recent updates, which is what brought me back into this game. I also didn't know what to stream today, and it was either this or Cooking Simulator. And Cooking Simulator I want to do when I can play it on VR, because chop chop chop, I gotta be a chef someday. Gotta put culinary experience into my thing. I press the button. Oh no. Okay, I got it. I'm Milu. I saw your boat pull in. I can't read. So you're just a rich tourist, come to buy a little postcards and novelty t-shirts? No, means I'm looking to start a new life here. Oh, blah. What am I supposed to do with all these novelty t-shirts? Start an online business and hope that someone buys them, but no one really buys novelty t-shirts online, and I found that out the hard way. Dang your whole life, Dealy? You got it going on. Oh, I read that wrong. I'm very confused, chick. I'm using them new here. My favorite type of person, one I don't know yet. I'm Ara. What else do you know about people? Hello. Look at these little, I can't zoom in. Look at these little Ooblets. It's a dumb burp. They're dumb. I want a clumper. How do, dearie? My number is not up, is it? I'm Mizu, moving to the old farmhouse. Oh, good. I'm Mead and I run the little garden shop here, so I guess we'll be seeing a lot of each other. If you have any spare produce, you can sell it to me. And if anyone starts asking too many questions, tell me first. Imagine that's your intro in life. Hey, someone asking you too many questions, send them to me. Don't ask why. Just send them to me first. Taffy. Taffy do, yes, it's true. Okay, then the Mizu. Go away now. That's me. like talking to people a lot. But go away now. You lost all your points. Imagine. If only you had the luck that I have. I have quite an immense amount of luck, probably. I don't really remember how much luck I have. Howdy doody, looking for a bun? I don't think so, I'm just moving to town. How to Badge Town? One local bumblebee delivery fella. Oh. I have so many points. Here's a little gift from the Bumblebee Company to welcome me to town. I have so much luck. Tell me one thing that I fell off of being lucky from. Tell me. You're talking to the person that like gets the 0.1% chance because they wanted it that badly. I've also won a raffle recently where I had no chance of winning, but I ended up winning it because I wanted it so badly. I manifested it for myself. You just gotta have better luck. Plus, these are just points. Now, if you manifest into something you really, really want, it'll get there, probably. It'll happen one way or another, even if it's not the way that you intended it. Blink, blunk, blink, blunk. Hello? Each bumblebees for a quick and easy boost to your energy and mood, probably. Tested by himself. Probably just a sticker crash. Are you the research assistant I requested 3 years ago? No, I'm just new here. I'm Mizu. Introductions. Okay, sure. I'm Magnolia and I operate the Leanery, which serves a variety of purposes too complicated to get into right now. And if you're gonna be sticking around, you should have this. A grumbler. I don't like where you're going with this. Now you can actually see me pick up the cup. Picking up the cup. That's not what I want to do. Anyway. He actually lost all his points. We're making stonks here. Imagine losing. You keep track of all your tasks, items, friends, that sort of thing. How does it all do all that? Science and magic and junk. You'll figure it all out. Or you won't. I have no metric of your aptitude for these sorts of things. Mizu is hostile tonight. That's because I'm not working at the casino right now, so I can be as hostile as I want. What am I gonna lose? Probably nothing today. You're standing awfully close to me. Oh hi, I'm Mizu and I'm new in town. I suppose you'll be wanting to know my name now, huh? That's okay, you can tell me when you're ready. Okay, fine. I'm Charles. I make clothes at my shop, Kibambon. I shake your hand, but I don't do that. Okay. I wonder if he's the last person I have to talk to. I don't think I can use this yet. Well, no different. I shouldn't go running off yet. I want to go talk to the people. I had to put a really long cooldown on it because people were redeeming it a little too much the first time. And then the loopholes were found. And then y'all just seemed to have enough points after watching me for a while that I wasn't able to drink that much water again. So then I put a really long cooldown on it because before it was like only a certain amount to be redeemed. But then people didn't like that. So then I just ended up doing that. And then I just ended up putting a cooldown on it instead. Customer, what can I get you? Bean juice, Spressy? Sorry, I don't have any money. Not winning customer of the month so far. Well, when you do scrounge up some money, you spend it here at Cuddle Cups. Oops. I refuse to drink water. What am I drinking? You'll never find out. But it's probably water because my manager makes me drink water on these days because he doesn't let me enjoy my life. I'm Double and I serve the best and only bean juice in town. Splenda! Everyone is here now. So basically, Ooblet clubs are little social groups that have their own themes and personalities. These are our local Ooblet club leaders. I thought I'd let them each give you a quick pitch to see what they're about. I don't care. Just give me the cute one. But they're so cute. You know what? We're going with fun buns. What the? Yeah. I knew you'd pick us. I've got the cutest, patutest baby ooblet for you to love and take care for. Oh, you two look like a perfect match. Thank you. We were just meant to be. Now that you've got an ooblet, you should try getting into a dance-off. Ooblets are mysterious creatures and they apparently love dancing. It's very important to them. All we can do is support their interest and set up elaborate, contrived competition dance scenarios for them to show often. You'll be amazed at the sort of conflicts that get resolved through the medium of dance. Oh, here comes a worthy competitor to let you practice. We gotta challenge him. Click him. Dance battle! Hype him up! Hype him up! Go faster! Come on, I don't have time to wait for these things! Please. Ooh! I wonder if this is just automatic, because I wanted to hype him up. Yes! Hype him up! Hype him up! Hype him up! Alright, yeah, pull out that little... Yeah, look at the little dance. He gets another little dance. Ooh, a little flip this time, a little leggy shake. Look at him fighting. That's scary. And one height. Okay, let's get a height. Yeah, look at him go. Look at those two little ones. Dance, 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 dance. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's hot though. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He put down some roots. Alright, I think we can end him. Oh, we can't do that one though. Alright, let's go ahead and throw some 6 points our way. Oh, here's a free one. $11 points. Sorry about the motorcycle, by the way, if you can end up hearing it. It's been a motorcycle going literally back and forth and back and forth and back and forth every single night. And it's not like they live there. If they lived there, I would know. But instead, and I'm complaining because I've been doing it every night, and like one time it was like 12 a.m. and they were still using their bike, and I'm like, it's a residence. Go to it somewhere else. No, I don't want your seed. I don't want your inferior seed compared to mine. If your seed ain't cute, I don't want it. Meet Tinstel at the farmhouse, and then we go. And then we go. My mom messaged me, oh no. Hold on, I'm about to lose my face for a bit. Oh, I just lost my face, hold on. Hello. Oops. Hi! It's so nice to see you! How are you? I know I didn't catch your stream the other day because you were feeling a little down. Everything's well. I know I just didn't stream the other day, but I was excited for it. House. Of course, I keep up with you. It's not much right now, but what do you expect for a free house? I'm sure you'll be able to fix it up and make it real pretty. Maybe add some bunting. Bunting always helps. It's good that you're feeling better now. I'll be at your next stream, though. I'll be there. Ah! By the way, don't think I forgot about, Super Smash Bros. I remember that. I have just been consumed by it. It's like Pokemon Unite, that thing has me going. I will hydrate on cooldown. I'm just trying to use DM with others. Me too, don't worry. The amount of times I have to awkwardly go like, hello, hello, it's me. Do you want to maybe do something? And then they respond, and I'm like, back out. Where's the X button? I wish to stay alive, so no. Highlighted. I feel like contact them and just afraid they'll react like something. Yes, it's DMing to me is personally nerve-wracking. There's only very few people that I will DM. I just, especially on Twitter or something, I can't do it. I might like absolutely look up to you or something, or I might want to be your friend, and I can't do it. I'm like, I'm not good with small talk. What do I do here? Yes, I feel like it's common with a lot of people, which is like a little bit ironic, only because like there's so many people that are like, I want to talk to them, and that person probably wouldn't mind talking to you or has the same thing. You just kind of have to learn to like talk to them, and you have to, if you click, you click. If you don't click, you know, maybe you can do something on later, or you just won't be like fully friends, but you can still talk to them. Or you don't connect at all again with some people, then you cry. Hi, Chippy. Take Chippy for example. I DM her. I DM her a lot. That's it. That's all. I send her random YouTube videos, and eventually we became friends. I think we're friends. You have to ask her about our relationship to friends. Psycho is actually someone that I talked to recently, and that is nerve-wracking as well. And I heard your little heart beating faster, by the way. Don't think I can hear that. I think that's too seriously, though. I like playing with people. Here's what I usually use for initial reaching out. Just takes a split second. You can type a message with no feeling of anxiety, and then text a stick. I'm gonna solve it. It's confidence to hit enter, so you just gotta be confident for that small amount. Burst through the confidence and you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. But I don't do it, so don't look at me for be friends. Yeah, friends. Just kidding. I'm willing to DM people. Even though I got bullied by Piggy, it was fun. Yeah, that was something. But also to emergencies, I usually use them. You just gotta push through. You see, weirdly enough, because Mingy's trying to call him out, he actually DMs quite a few people, and if he doesn't, I don't know how he connects with people. He networks somehow, and I'm just sitting here like, how do I talk to this person? And I even mean that to friends. Like, do I send this to them? No. Just talk to people forehead. Actually, a beauty standard is, the reason they call it forehead is because you're supposed to be able to put 4 your fingers and hold it up to your, like, from, oh my god, I lost it, and do it from your eyebrow to the top of your forehead. And like, if it's only 4 fingers from like your eyebrows to the top of your hair, then you have a perfect forehead. But if it's in one less or one more, you know where you stand. I also have a perfect forehead. High five. You gotta be popular in other cultures. My forehead crisp. I have a 3 because my brains. Do you actually have a 3 head? Nice! If any of you doesn't have one, Just if yours is too small, I will use my hand and I will do it for you, and then you'll have a perfect forehead. If your head's too big, I will get someone else's hand and do it for you, and then you'll have a perfect forehead and no excuses. My brain big, but it's smooth. Your brain's like massive. Do you know how much brain I could fit in here? I could fit so much brain in here. And yet there's like this amount of brain. You can see him. He's the size of my brain. He's my entire brain. That's why I say he runs the operations, because I'm secretly being controlled by a hamster sometimes. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Please hold. Oh, I'm supposed to water the cleanse. Small brain superior has room to dodge attacks. Kind of. I'm thinking about how brains work, and technically having a smaller brain is less beneficial. Having a bigger skull is more beneficial. Because this is a little bit weird, but you actually can't hold your brain in your hands if you were to take it out, because it's so watery, you wouldn't be able to hold it. It'd be like goop in your hands. You have to harden it to hold the brain. So brain in a jar does not exist unless it has been processed first. Thank you! We have a new fit. I actually didn't show off my fit. Please hold as I, hold on. I mean, the amount of times I bonk my head, I hope I have a good skull. Hold on, let me just, get on the table again. Okay. No questions asked about how these physics work. Look, I have a new outfit. Also known as, I kinda didn't want to dress up today. So we going casual. Every part works. I'm just gonna, hold on. Whoop. Do 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 do. You know what, Miggy? I'm done with you. Just gonna have floating monster cans for a bit. Don't question it. So here we have look, we have little garters. And then the most important thing, in my entire opinion, the fish. Oh, look at the fish. He is precious. Him. He's supposed to move. Oh, there he goes. See? Oh, well, let me just bounce really hard until he actually moves. Ugh. Oh, how does it work out? I'm tired. Wow. Okay. Hello. Oh, wait, hold on. The most important thing, actually, oops, is the back. Don't ask questions about how I do these things. Look, it's a little cat. Wow. I like the design, alright? Why do you think I copped the freaking jacket? It's because the cat's adorable. Womp 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 womp. Wow, I actually made it back in one piece. Probably. I probably didn't, I'm not gonna lie. And then we went back to the game. Oops. What up? There you go. Okay. Totally did not just get completely sidetracked whatsoever. So I always get sidetracked. That's like my entire issue. It's always on task. Don't worry. I am probably on task. Although I think the task is just to have fun. I think that's always just been my entire task. Do we have anything in here? Nothing good, but I am gonna put these in there just because we don't need them every day. Because if we use all of them, then they're gonna be gone. Whee! I should probably continue the game because I want to catch more ooblets. If we catch more ooblets and we have cuter things, honestly, and they're just cute. Alright. Look at him! I don't remember his name. Look at him! Actually, let me show you him. Tud! Look at Tud! Actually... Oh, there's 2 variations of Tud. Why can't I not hold on to him? I want more Tuds in my life. If you're a Tud, come see me. Go spawned around a bit or something. You're kicking me out. What evolutionary absences led to me being tired every morning, not sleepy at night? I don't remember if that's how I actually remember this. Oh, that's right. They have little things on the top of their head. How do? I think I'd use how do more than Delio because that just sounds better to me, but also I don't know. I just want to go do dance battles. I need more pets. Oh, that's right. I'm supposed to collect things. I completely forgot. Oh, let's get our cans. Collecting these cans is a good thing because then we get rid of the trash. And if we get rid of the trash, we get things. I'm sorry, I don't have those sweetie bees yet. I can't dance with any of them, which means I can't have them as a pet yet. But I will eventually, and that's all that should matter right now. Okay, clean that up. Oh, I should go talk to you. What is this? Gets you access to Tinsel's taskboard. Dancing mushrooms. Nice, you found the time again. I feel like... Oh, dancing mushrooms. Something about them just makes me laugh. Probably noticed my open office layout and that it's cardboard boxes. Turns out an aggressive little clicky colossus made town hall its home. Every time I try to go in, it starts biting my ankles. I guess I put it for the other guy. Maybe if we make a big show of beating him in a dance battle will be enough to get him to leave like a tricky. I don't know why that makes me laugh. Like, it's like a raccoon goes in and just goes, it just kicks you out. Like, I'm the mayor though. Not anymore. Puts on the crown. Alright, squad, roll out. Oh yeah, I'm gonna jam into this music. Good music to be able to hype up the little ooblets. Oh yeah, look at that little clicky class dance. Yes, give me a seed. Good job, little quick clothes. You did great. Plan me to grow a new friend. Oh, yes, we're making stonks with the seeds. Yeah. I knew you could do it. I totally had to come to terms with the permanence of my cardboard outdoor office. And she's writing it down. Wait, that's just a giant clipboard. I dig it. I dig it. My house isn't an eyesore. It keeps me warm at days. Anywho, I'll be moving into my new office here if you need me. Ooblets are gonna rule the world and you can't tell me otherwise. My other hand isn't working. I wonder if I can trick my hand really quick. Come on, Todd. Let's go do all this stuff. Oh, I want to go plant it actually. Woo! A spore bit. I see you. Bet. I don't like that one. Alright, shove in the cans. Shove in the cans. Shove in the cans. Please do not lick the reconstructor. Drink more than that. I drink a whole strawful. I drink a whole strawful. I don't see the issue at all. That was a little invasive. I drink enough. Maybe if you asked nicely, I would have been like, he's right. I drink a little too weak. But you didn't ask nicely, so maybe I won't do it. I wasn't about to do nothing like that. Apologies. We've had some prior issues with invalid reconstructor inputs. What is the reconstitutor? It's a machine that transforms a variety of things into a slurry. You never ask me for anything nicely. Yeah, because I don't have to. Why would I have to ask for things nicely when I just go, please, please, give, Ooh, we have to go catch stuff first. I completely forgot. Alright, getting the plunger and thingy in, and we're casting the line. Donk. Now we wait. We got some locks. Again. I wanna do it again. I wanna do it again. Again. If you collect any mystery cans, be sure to put them in the reconstructor to get more bait. Oh my god, it's you. Imagine being late. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, I'm busy. I always forget that I can't do two of them. I am busy having dance battles here. Well, I guess right now we're recycling, but I was having really cool dance battles. You can scoot all the mystery cans. Nice. Okay, let's go pick stuff up for the day. Yonk. Shake, 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 shake. I'm offering my precious time to be here on your wonderful stream. Precious time. Actually, hold on. So, speaking about streams, earlier I was on Yina's stream. You might not know who that is, but I terrorized them today. Because they have a redeem me point channel thing. And we started filling up their screen to the point where their OBS did not want to open anymore. And it did after a very long while. And you could just hear the music just... Why did you come to the word terrorism? Hold on. I sent it to someone today. Kind of. This is what I did today. I terrorized them because every single one of these is a redeem. And I know this is not as bad as it got. This is just a small show of what we were doing today. They didn't mind too much, but this went from being 50 points to 500 because of how many we started claiming. It was great. It was a highlight. This is why you have to put, this is why you have to start putting, like, limits on your teams if you know they can get out of hand really fast, because, I take advantage of it. Why? It's fun. I was having fun. I mean, me and, like, a few other people, it wasn't just me, but let's just say I'm now subbed to their channel so I can get points faster, and I plan on getting 50k. I'm going to get 50,000 points so that I can slowly fill up their entire thing with 100 pictures of them, and then they won't be able to recover. They're not going to be able to recover. I'm going to click them as fast as humanly possible so that it just floods. It just floods them. And if they put a cooldown on it, I can wait. I can wait. But it's just because I like watching them. Of course, I mean, I'm supporting them in the end. I have to do this for 2 months. I have to watch them every single time they stream from 0 to finish for 2 months for me to do this project. And I'm gonna do it. And no one can stop me. Listen, sometimes you just want to have fun while supporting other people. And just sometimes things go down a little different paths than you think they would. Thank you. That's how I got Mud in channel. I had to save up 100k channel points. Was it 100k actually? There's no way. Actually, I'll pull that up later and I'll see how much it actually is, and then I will, if it is, I'll be very amazed because I could not put up the much time. Although I was streaming a lot back then, so it probably wasn't the hardest thing, but is how I have mod because you watch that much? Oh, thank you. My model? You mean me? Yeah. Hi. Thank you for liking the model than you originally thought. It's the same, just redressed. My editor is gonna have a great time knowing them. Oops, that's not how that works. Hold on. If I had half a brain, this would be working. Oh, I got it. I do remember you winning the coin flip and then you clipping it and being like, look at this, stonks. And I'm just sitting there like, I have to give him blood. My luck lost. I achieved high elo in Pokemon Unite to the point where I need a duo since everyone is queuing as a 5-man. I don't know, my hand's freaking out today, but I want to do that. I am pretty proud of you. Although that game isn't terribly difficult. I stopped playing rank for a bit because I kept getting 9-year-olds and I kept carrying them and I'm like, you know what, they don't deserve to win. I just didn't want them to win, so I stopped playing. What are you at though? I do know the ranks more or less. Expert, actually. That's not the highest, but that's pretty high. That's pretty high. Honestly, knowing you, I expected you to get higher. But only because you're good. Outcast players are mad next patch. Wait, are they nerfing them? Wait, I'm not happy with that. I don't mean them, but like, they're pretty good. Hex is also getting nerfed. No more Gengars. Alright, that's not too bad. As long as I leave Lucario alone, I will probably be a-okay. Because if Lucario is getting nerfed, then I have no one else to play. And I'm not going to the bird that swallows fish. I don't think Cinder Ace really needed a nerf, though. Whew. I'm safe with Lucario, then. Haha, one and the same. I don't know, I just feel like Lucario being an all-round is really good and they're able to like 1v3 like stop him easily. Charizard is getting really? Wait, are they touching Pikachu? I don't want my Swaggetry to go away. Oh, I still don't have anything to sell. They need to hotfix Zapdos. How are they burnt though? People throwing games for free. That's true. There's like a lot that needs to be fixed. Getting 9-year-olds off is the first thing. Pikachu isn't touched since Absol can one-shot you. Really? Every time I play Absol, I have horrible luck with them. I thought they were gonna be really strong, but I need 9-year-old Q and Big Boy Q. Bro, just play on my account. Like, I'll just hand you my Switch and just be like, here you go. Get the 9-year-old Qs again, because I don't care about them enough. They're not bad, but I just like, I don't want to give a 9-year-old a free win. Absolutely scary. I'll have to go back into them then, and once I'm good at them, I'll go ahead and play with you. Just so that I can score on some kids. I want to play so hard, but I have the ability to. Yes, you do. What are you talking about? There's voice chat in the game. Most people don't know that there is voice chat in the game. It's so weird. Like, they can use it. Yeah, it's just... I mean, like, I get it. You just use Discord, but, like, some people actually do connect. I'm just telling you that right now. Oh, we have to find more of those. Blink. Blink. Wait, Obsidian's super duper rare here. Hold on. I just hit the jackpot with that. I played against a top 100 Snorlax and he shreked me. I think if I ever went against someone that high, I would not recover. I'm glad that you're okay though. I hope it was a good experience for you. Even if you did not make it out in the end. His name is Dunmere on Twitch. I'll look him up and see what he's throwing down. I have 2 of them. What? Oh, there's a 3rd one actually. He farmed my team. No, I must be thinking of someone else. There's no way. There's no way you're talking about who I think you're talking about. Yeah, 3 of... Oh, actually, that's a different one. What? Hello. Also, hi, Overwatch. You man. It sounds like vaguely familiar, but I might also not be correct about what I'm thinking. Actually, that's what we need. Alright, yoinked. He's Master and can unite now. He faced a Masters player. Look at you go. Well, you didn't really go anywhere. You just died. But you know, it's a thought that counts. Alright, let's go dance battle the mushroom. Seems like it's a little bit more down, huh? There we go. Wait, Blastoise is coming out? I know, that one Pokemon came out, the green one. Gardevoir came out? Oh, I want them so bad. I have to log in today, hold on. Throw everything to the side. I forgot to log in today. Gardevoir is Syndra. I have had Avon tell me who's who so much that I just can't take it anymore. Please hold on, I'm logging in for my daily Pokemon stuff. I logged into Genshin Impact and already did everything, so you can't get me there, but for this I haven't logged in, so. The beta, Gardevoir, and Blastoise are busted. I thought Gardevoir was already out though. I'm pretty sure she's already out. And yes, it's a she. Only know that because it's wearing a dress instead of pants. Because they made that a clear distinction. It came out later to hotfix them. Wait, so not like they're nerfed or like did they get worse? I couldn't connect to the server. Oh, there you go. No, I'm gonna get Greninja, and like, I don't want Greninja. I want Gardevoir! Give me Gardevoir! I am like 5,000 away from getting Gardevoir, and that's not what I'm looking for. Alright, I got my daily for Pokemon. If you haven't gotten your Pokemon Unite daily, you should. Ugh. Gardevoir has damage, which takes longer to scale with no peel. She can get one shot. I wonder if... I don't know about Blastoise. I changed my screen monitor by accident, so... Alright, we're just gonna have to pick a card. There you go. Probably hot picks his passive shield, which is sometimes really dumb. I feel like they have a lot to fix in like just balance in general, but okay, they'll probably get to it, and if not, then good luck everyone that plays. I was gonna play it on stream, but I don't have a capture card, so I can't. I have to buy a capture card and I forget to, because it's not my priority. Welcome back. I didn't even know where you went. You're always working on something, I swear. Oh no, they flustered me. Let's just steal the points. I haven't been able to stream much because of them. But it'll be very worth in the end. You're gonna say that, and then my scuff goblins are gonna come after you, and it's gonna be very scuffed. Yes, Tud, grow. Nice, Tud got a new move, Tadpoka. Yeah, give me a seed, Fleeble. Good job, Fleeble, you did great. And he poops out a seed. Alright, we're just gonna walk through everyone. I feel like there's something on the ground weirdly enough, but I guess not. I can't dance with you because I don't have sweetie beaties. I would be running right now, but I can't. Was he trying to give? I think the mayor's pet was trying to give something we couldn't. I'm not stinky, I showered. I take regular shower unlike Apex players, thank you. The amount of people I made mad, by the way, because I said that, knowing it's true. Oh, no letter! It was funny watching so many people like, oh, I shower? And they were like, haha, you got everyone laughing, like, with, like, so done with it. But just, I'm like, you're just mad, bro. I just made you mad. You can go play whatever you want, I don't care. I was just making like a joke because I've met so many Apex tryhards. What's up? I don't like your answer. I don't like that. You wanna know why I don't play Apex? Or like any game in general? Is because I'm out of hard drive. I don't have an SSD. Because you said no Wimpy Simp, I'm gonna take a Wimpy Sip. That's it. If you ask nicely, maybe. You literally never asked me nicely. It seems like your issue. Sorry. Too busy being cute out here. Just kidding. Oh my god. Hey Mizu. I would like to play Apex with you one day. I literally, how many times do I have to tell you? You want to see my hard drive space? Hold on, I'll be back. Oop, gotta hide that really quick. Like, you want to buy me a new freaking hard drive? You want to do it? Because I don't have space for it. I don't have space anymore. I can't play anything. I haven't uninstalled so many things to, like, get back down here. I can't do it anymore. I'm not saving up for a hard drive. I'm being up for other stuff. Because I don't need a hard drive because I already have every game I want to play. Well, right now. I like uninstall games that don't play too long, and then I like put in the games that I want to play right now. But Apex would just take way too much space. I'm also thinking about uninstalling Valorant, but like that's because it's also taking too much space. And I'm also thinking about Valorant, Cold War, Overwatch. They're all on the line. They're like next. If I want anything else, they're next. I hate hiccuping. Chippy, where do you get your emotes from? Like, every day I see you, I just like have to sit there and question a little bit more. Like, it's not like they're bad or anything. I just really have to sit there and be like, this is the new one she has. Okay, I see. Only won 3 dance battles today. Pog. I don't do VTubering, sorry. If I did, I'd probably be selling them, but I can't because I'm useless. I got lucky someone gift subs to a channel. Now that's pretty pog. Listen, I've tried Blender. It does not go very well for me. So I just ask other people to do it for me. Are these watered? Guess so. You wanna ask me where I got my model from? Who are you, the police? Huh? Are you the police? I can't tell you're the police. Getting hacked, honestly. I can't be here if the police show up. What did I tell you? I can't be here if the police shows up. Am I hiding? Am I hidden? From this stream when ASMR mode and it scared me. No, I just gotta hide from the police, you know, normal Mizu things. You know what, I'm not ever telling you how I got my model solely because of what you want to stream, like ever. Like, you don't, because I've known you for a long time, you don't get rights. You don't. Wait, are you the cute one or the ugly one? A fancy mushroom. They're one of the, there's like a few people that'll say that too. They're one of them. Go this way. Actually, maybe one day I will read an ASMR streamer. Just because I know most of the people that watch me don't like ASMR. I would make people unhappy. I thought I could get something there, but I guess I can't. Nope. They can go into places? I broke the game. You ever oh, thank God, the door opened again. Yo, ASMR, depending what it is, can be great though. Easy to sleep. I mean, like, I feel the same way, but like, I've talked to other people and they're like, I don't like it. And I'm like, okay. It's not for you then. Guess I won't send you this video of, I find really weird ASMRs. I find really weird ASMRs. I go off the end quite frequently. A police officer? Didn't give us cans today. How am I supposed to get cans? I have so many people I have to talk to daily. Alright, go up here. We collect the shroom. I don't have to chop that up, but I'm going to because now I'm committed. You are the grumpiest little creature I've seen. I can watch absolutely any type of ASMR. I really have no limits. Well, like, limits as in, like, my ears don't get bothered by a lot of stuff. So I can watch food ASMR, I can just watch normal one, I can watch, like, storytelling ones or something, I don't mind. Though I think it's more of acquired taste. Ugh. A new ooblet? We don't even have Tud with. Where's Tud? What? Hold on, I lost my ooblet. Wow, that game is not optimized right there. Develop woodlands to level 2. Wildlands, yep. Except for was born. Add one more dumper to the wildlands. Have one dumper in the wildlands. Wait, I can add residents? Hold on. Alright, where's the burb? I literally saw them like there they are. Dumper. Dumper, but they have a hat on. Emotional support dumper. Wait, why can't I terrorize them? I need 2 Muzz. I don't have 2 Muzz. Hold on. Oh, everything they're requesting I don't have. Oh, actually, I think I can go and sell seashells by the seashore. And then we make some stonks. And once we have stonks, we make more stonks. Yep. Okay, I'm going to the reconstitute. We throw the cans in. Good enough. I can't remember if these are actually wanted by other Ooblets. I want to sell them, that's what I know. Why save it when you can sell it? And if you need it later, then good luck. Ooh, a curly horn. Yoink. Oh, I forgot to go talk to that one person up there. Mizu ASMR when? Sure, let me just go buy like a Dio microphone really fast and then I'll start doing ASMR. I feel like I'm gonna lose so many viewers if I do that though. I think the most I thought about doing though is drawing with like ASMR, I guess, because I end up being quiet anyway, so it's like not too much of an issue. Just do an entire whispering ASMR stream. I don't think I'd be— Why are you— You're not home. Wait, there you are, Tud. I did not know where you were. I legitimately do not think I would be able to whisper the whole time. You can try telling me otherwise, but like, probably will not happen. Sad ass sad caps. Wait, when are you doing your ASMR then? Actually, I think I saw someone request that for you, and then I was like, 100k channel point challenge. I know so many people that would get that so easily if they would not spend it on you saying something. They wouldn't redeem it on you saying something. I've actually— oh, that reminds me, I was saving up for that. Well, like, I am, not I was. Like, I'm saving up for that. I have quite a few channel points, but not as many as I'd like for that. Just because I gotta help the viewers get what they want. Resets your channel points, don't you dare. I did not turn on notifs for nothing. Clicky Claus is coming out. Hello, Gremlin. Oh, I love Clicky Claus. I am going to put him. It's okay, who needs channel points anyways? I do! I need channel points, excuse you. Hold on, you gotta put in Clicky Claus. Give me a second. Yes, now they're both with me at all times. Oops. Now we wait. That's why I love it. It's cute, relaxing, unless you're doing dance battles. I must dance to get stuff. I can tell I'm not far in yet. Label. I forgot I planted you. They do have. Okay. I'm okay. I like how immediately after you say that, I just I lose everything just because of the mushroom. Mushroom hand. Mushroom hand. That's not what I meant by losing, but okay. No, I meant in general. Yeah, I know what you meant, okay? You little freaking... Ah! If I get these, then I won't be able to give them to the other ones for dance. No! I don't have enough energy to pick stuff up, and I really need that cloth. You're just mad that I'm better? You're better at what, huh? You're better at being dumb. Oh. There, is that better? Ugh, I burped. I drank that too fast. No sleep. No. It's because... Okay, so I've been drinking like this. That's it. For one hydrate. And he wasn't happy about it, so I told him, if you ask nicely, maybe I won't do such a small little sip. Yeah, it's because if I finish my drink, then I'm gonna have to go refill it, and I don't want to get up. Wait, does that give me energy? No, it gives me energy, but that gives me 40 energy, but I don't need that much energy. Stuffs. Consume. Alright, where are you gonna take me to get that? Let's see. It makes me laugh at this autopilot itself to go to get what you want. Even if it's completely unconventional, it does not make sense or is really made properly. No, I have to eat another one. Okay. Consume. Yoink. Alright, and then we can go to bed. Wait, hold on. Let me see what I have to deposit. Deposit all. I still need more, and my sweetie beaties will be done in a few days. Or I think it's tomorrow. Maybe it's tomorrow. Don't call me that. I can't pick up the mushroom. So we pick it up tomorrow. Enter. Yeet yourself into bed. I yeet myself into bed. Where like... I'm in the air for like a good solid second. Lumps. That's not just a lump stump, that's a gleamy lump stump. Drink the wawa, then go refill it. I'm still quite a few ways away. You know what? Oh, the mailbox. Speedy girl. Thank you, Mead. Oh, we have more mail actually. I want to stop by and welcome you to the neighborhood, but I figured a letter involves a lot less social anxiety, so that's why you're reading this instead of me knocking on your door. I brought you a cupcake. Ooh, a root cake. Look at how pretty the rain is. It's all sparkly. Oh, do I have anything to grow? Oops, that's not the right button. I don't, but I'm gonna go see if I can. Actually, the most important thing right now is to catch that gleamy. Yeah, I'll get to you in a second. Hold on. There's a gleamy out there somewhere. Oh, there they are. Ready. Gleamies are rare, so I really want that seed. Marginal Mamba gain 1 point for no cost. Look at Clicky Claws bleeding. Yeah, break it down. Wait, not that hard. Hold on. Oof, I can feel them turning up the heat. Totally isn't the computer though. Our sun platoon turns, but not just us. One of our little Ooblets is done. No, the Ooblets give us 3 points. It's done. You know what? We're stealing some points, yo, because you stopped at Ooblets. We're taking yours away. Let's add one cluster to them. Alright, one cluster. Let's steal some more of their points. All the points they have, those are my points now. End turn. They're stealing the points back. And then we steal them back and get 2 more. Yeah, breaking it down. Breaking it down. Why are they earning 0 points? It's because I flustered them? Oh no! Their moves are so good. They keep stunning Cookie Claws. Cookie Claws, get back up! Don't have any points for us to steal. Oh yeah! Cookie Claws, breaking it down harder than those fools. Yeah, Toad. Look at you go. Cookie Claws looks excited. Fleeble just did an entire front flip and I don't know. Yeah, give me that seed. I thought his name was Turd. His name's Todd. He's the cute. Let me go show you something really cool. Hold on. Hold on. Screw you. Go in. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Todd! What? I don't know the Todd yet. Hold on. Oh, it's because I can't scan him yet. I'll get there. How did you disable the Twitch auto sensor again? Disable the what? What auto sensor? I need to rank with a massive 5-man powerhouse. Oh, you can just lower it so it's not too high. Because some of it's a little too extreme. And I already put keywords in that I don't want to be like set out. Like the rest I kind of don't mind too much. Yeah, I think you can also disable it, because there's this one streamer that didn't have it enabled at all. I read the keywords and thought about updating it. I don't know what keywords. New words, new year, and that's what I like to hear. Oh, there are the cans. See if there's any on the dock. Oh.
No? Oh.
Band is better than Eden, though. I would be absolutely crushed if they were eating the Ooblets. Oh, I completely ran by it to get a glink instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing. What's this? A rain plop. Becoming sprinklers out of this. Hold on, that's absolutely, like, amazing. Written up a number of Ooblets for mocking. Oh, imagine that, like, you're a cop of the town, and, like, all you can do is write Ooblets up because you're mocking. I can't. Where do? Probably wrote up. No, his name's Tide. Tide. More sprinkler stuff. Look, his name's Tide. Tide of the species. Tide. I'm gonna time you out. Look at how he does not deserve any of this. Look at him. I didn't know you could give them hats. I'm crying. They can wear hats. How do I get a hat? I need to get hats as soon as possible. Little hats. Okay, back to the game. Alright, let's go in. Alright, Clomper, let's go. Look at that solid squad over there. They're flustered and we're breaking it down. That is the most depressing thing I've... Aren't you really just said good luck? Alright, Kumi Claws, bring out your steel. Oh wait, that ran us 8 points, I didn't even notice. Oh well, go next round. Gain a bean, that's 5 cards in a row. They're throwing down. Alright, they wanna throw down? Go ahead and steal some of your points then. Yes, right, go back down to 0 points. Your moves, they ain't as hard as my squads. Oh yeah, break it down, little one. Come on, 3-point it up. 8-point card is honestly saving us right now. Even though we're not doing bad and they're not doing any better. I got dance moves that they're trying to steal. This Betamo's gonna try to go for the steal points. Chomper, Clomper, them actually Clomper. That's right, break it down, Cricket Claws throwing it back. Leave his hand somewhere. Hopping mad. Ah, Cricket Claws, maybe have nothing common. Skip stab. Sun's target for 1 turn, now we're talking. Yo, give me a seed, boy. You're being great god now. Got a seed. Smells like a Shrump's bum in here. Let's flip the switch. Guess our other towers need to be reactivated before we can reconnect to the Orb-net. The nearest tower should be in Mamunia. When you're ready, you should head over there and turn that one on too. You can use Gimble's balloon to get to Mamunia, even though the balloon isn't up and running. Past life, I was a Clicky Claws. Me too. Past life, I just know I was a Clicky Claws. Ooh, our pockets are filled to the brim. They can't be. That can't be. I need to put stuff in. Dang it. I could have had this whole thing on this whole time. The new Ooblet research scanner for a project on Ooblet physiology. Can I help out? Oh yes, definitely. Have you got a background in metagraviton counterphysics? I don't think so. Well, you might still be able to help. I've been having a hard time collecting Ooblets myself, so I can use a research assistant to find specimens. I can give you a reward of 50 gummies for each unique Ooblet you bring me. I just need to scan them real quick, and then you can have them back. That's all you get. Oh, that's right. That's what I was doing that. Is because I want the gleam for the reward. I should try it out with any Ooblets you already have to. Yeah. Of course. God, he's scanning in. Specimen data cannot be used to print a 3D figure, and you can print off a figurine of any Ooblet you've scanned here in the machine to the left. Figurines don't necessarily serve a scientific purpose, but I brought this 3D printer and need some use for it. Oh, you can complete the figurine collections in Town Hall, since it'll probably like that. We got, yeah, so we got more. Clicky Claws, you're in. Hold on. We got one more. Weeble scanned and ready to go. Arms and everything. And we got a letter. And 5 dance battles. Alright, let's go ahead and print Weeble. And lastly, wait. Yeah, I think I did the math right. I did not do the math right. Oh. Try again later. Hankerbot coming in hot. He's dead. Well, not dead as much as never alive and not really sentient if he were. What is it? My unfinished prototype? Duh, for the Hankerbot. Oh, that's right. The Hankerbot is able to tell you what gifts people want and when they want something specifically, which is like semi-cool, but I think it's a little bit better if you're a little bit more into the game. Like when you're actually like planning stuff to get it. Raindrop. Raindrop on my head. I still need one more of those, and the other ones I haven't even touched. I think... Oopsies. Actually, can I get any orders? Oh, she's gonna come talk to us instead. Oh yeah, this is Plenty's bulk order office. Hi, Plenty. What? No, that's Invoice. Our resident sleepyhead. He's a regional distribution coordinator for Plenty. So what is Plenty? It's the company that stocks the myriad of automats and so many automats. You can make good money selling your produce to them. Just check out open orders on Invoice's clipboard. Let's see. What do you want to do? Probably Sweetie Beauties, even though it takes us for a while. You get pretty good payment. One of our to-doozies is to increase our town exports by fulfilling a few Plenty's orders. And since I don't have a farm, I'm gonna leave that in your capable hands. We're already responsible. I'm not very responsible. Oh man, let's talk to you first. You got a letter. I really should just had you come to pick these up instead of sending them all out for delivery. Whatever. Congrats on the new badge. Scan 3 Ooblets at the learnery. Oh yeah, we're making stonks. Don't forget to water your plants every day and rip out any weeds that get too close. Thank you, Mimo. My goodies. Does not sell for very much. I think we do something with that, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna go put these in a chest because somewhere in my heart I feel like we're supposed to keep most of the stuff. To our luggage case we go. Alright. Let's see. Oh, I want that one. Put that away. Oh, we have to put those in the office. I am not. I drink enough. Trevor would be very displeased. Because you call him that, like, I'm less likely to do it. Be nice to our friends that work hard for us. He's working very hard, and all you do is be mean to him. There it is. He doesn't. Can you not tell? Of course you can't. You're not an oob whisperer. That immediately grew. Hello. So many new friends. Alright, I'm gonna go scan them in. The gleam leaves a trail behind them. That's what you get. That's kind of a scam. She just hates me. I've done nothing wrong, technically. Just because you're not winning doesn't mean I'm not winning. Everyone's gotta lose once in a while. I know that a little too well. Oh, that's right. I should be trying to make food, because if I make food, then... I forgot. My head went empty on that one. Oh god. After all the times I saved her butt on Dead by Daylight and helped her on Final Fantasy XIV. You are a great addition, but unfortunately... Listen... You'll be fine. It's like you act like you're not trying to hold something over my head, which is even worse. I just tilt that twice. Oops. Got a kind of corner now. Oh my god. Let's try to fix Final Fantasy. Yeah, I don't know what's been going on with that. I honestly hope you get it fixed because we need to run stuff. There's so much to run. Hello, Benji. You are in the okay, educated, but not. More wishies. Yeah, I would like to run stuff, but I can't if it's crashing every 5 minutes. Maybe you just have too many mods installed. Maybe it's just it's time that like I don't want to do this anymore. Nope, I turned all of them off. I don't know then. Holy cow. It still crashes. It sounds like you just have really bad luck right now. I mean, it's been like happening. I've been trying to think of what it could be, like honestly. I talked about it with Avon and we're just gonna come up with a solution together. Ultimately, what I'd say is that you should send your computer back in because that's probably for the best because it just keeps not working. Even though it sucks. I'd have to do that. I've had to do that before and I did not make it. It's on my PC, but I thought your computer wasn't working with other stuff. Is it just the game? Nights? Final Fantasy isn't working. My PC is fine now, but it wasn't before, and that's the thing. I fixed it when I updated my BIOS. That was a weird burp. That was a hiccup, actually, not a burp. I'm still thinking. I have a friend helping me through a lot of it right now, and that's good. I think there's only one person. Actually, if you still end up needing help, I can ask. Oops. You can ask the group I'm in if you like have that many issues, and they can try to help. Because there's more than one person there at least. They're dealt with this before, so they try their hardest to help me fix it. Oh. Things like this don't really happen, so I just don't deal with it. Hi, Sage! Busted the Busted. Busted. Oh my god, I forgot that was a thing that I play. Welcome back. Uh-oh. Oh, that's where it was. It's going pretty well. I got a gleamy. It's great. Ooblets. Just don't accidentally buy something. Wait, can I get the second one? We have a sprinkler now. Yeah. Okay, we got the other ooblets, so now we can try to do this. But how do I craft? Hold on. Hold on. I need to fix up my house. I think my house is... Where are the other ones? Where'd they go? Bum 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 bum. Oops. They're carrots. Oh, I'm growing one. Close. Oh no, no, no. Maybe I don't think I gave anyone else one of the cloth ones. Might have just heckled herself. Music is a favorite, well, it's the second favorite part of this game. Turn me against her. Remember to hydrate. Gonna head out for a shower back in a bit. Look at your shower, why are you influencing them? You see, Sage is always my favorite one. Look at these babies right here. Look at the tuds. They're wearing little swimming goggles, and you don't love them? And you don't love them? You know what? You know what? I'm just gonna deal with the issue. You're right. You're completely right, Knight. Thank you. Thank you for telling me what I should be doing. Alright, I have fixed it. Don't worry. I was not here for a bit, but now I'm back, so I cannot read any of the prior messages just because I had to go fix one thing. How is your night music going? Pretty well. I just had to do something. I just had to fix something. Nothing. Anyway, look at how cute Tut is. Look at how cutie patootie. The little babies. I think I'll put the statue of Tut in. Oh, you know, just fixing something. Just a little something. Nothing, just made Tut superior. I just didn't want any Tut slander in my chat, honestly.
Oh.
I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. I swear to God. I'm not about to have. I am not gonna have this in my chat, so help me God. I am not gonna have it. Alright? I'm tired. I am sick and I am tired of it. Okay, back to Ooblets now, shall we? I don't mind a lot of things, but you cannot mess with my Ooblets. They're cute, and they don't do anything. It's a chill game, and I'm not about to have you slander their name like this. Back to a peaceful playthrough, shall we? Back to my very peaceful playthrough where I don't have to deal with anything or anyone. But by anyone, I mean Knight specifically. Creamy ooblets. I went to go to the bathroom for a few minutes. Do not worry about where he went. Don't question it, and I'm not checking my Discord because it closes my game, so you don't have to worry about that one either. Dang it, I should have gotten that one first. Alright, now we go back to our house. And we're gonna have to go take a nap before we can start watering everything again. Alright, now that they're all set, we can go take a nap, I guess. Ooh. Cruncher I made useful. If you ever wondered how we make powder ingredients like musk flour and fruit based with cruncher, we now have a cruncher. Crunches are items with an ooblet. Where is this? There we go. Okay. And then, oh, the mailbox. Seen if it's Prince got a fabricator and workshop. Fabricator, let's go, let's go, let's go. Well, I can't dance with those cuties yet, but I will eventually. But for now, we have to go check out the fabricator because now we can make stuff like sprinklers. I don't have to water everything every single morning. Ooblet. Ooblet replacement box. I think that's just like an interactive. Also, I like the house. It's like house, even bigger house, and that's just how you buy them, just from a model. I'm gonna make this. Okay, I have to make 4 of them. I just need to get the ingredients. So 40 gurneys and 8 clawflets. Alright, I'm already planting clawflets. I don't really want it. gardener time. Alright, I have to go start going picking up everything and then beating the crap out of sticks until they give me items. Oh, let's go put our cans in though. Where? There they are. Okay, now we have the cans in. We can go look for the different little ones. No. Yep. We already had trans with clicky claws. Okay. Oh, I feel that as long as they're happy, I'm happy. Especially with these cute little ooblets. Patrick is so awkward. Oh, I think I need one of these. Oh, I have 3 of them. I already have one of you. Okay, pick up our daily items. Picking up our daily items. And... please give me a clawfoot. Actually, we have a new thing. I don't know what I handed to her, but I know it was something. Add one more dumper in 21 minutes? I can't get a dumper in 21 minutes. Oh, speaking of clawfoots. Sometimes they don't make sense, but other times they still don't make sense how they're grabbed. Oh, dang, I thought that was one of them. Alright, I want to go back to the... I can't go the short way. I want to go back to the farm. So I can start beating stuff up. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Yeah, I think we got stuff. There we go. 30 of them. I need one more of those. Come on. Actually, I should go in maybe today. Brain think. Hold on. Common treasure chest. Yeah, I need one of those. Container for 16 items. Let's go put this in there and unload some of our inventory because I have way too much stuff and not enough space. Actually, can I put this? Oh, here, I can't. I feel like you were watching the 10-minute timer. You were timed out for 10 minutes. 10 whole diddly darn minutes. I need to fix my house first. I was also cracking up. Oh no. That can't be a good thing. I literally started crying when you timed me out. I don't want to deal with the war of the tuds. Like, I'm gonna send you a screenshot of what I had to do, and you're gonna laugh. Wait, that's 5. I can't count. I failed math for a reason. There she is. It's not ready yet. Okay, let's go take another nap. Hold on. My head snapped. Okay, I completely forgot I had to do something. So, thanks for coming to the stream. I will be here whenever Manager Sim yells at me to come here. So, thank you for watching. I will be playing more Ooblets next time. Have a good night. Bye bye.